Love them or hate them, press fit bottom brackets are now really common. And let's face it, whilst they do get a bad rap, the vast majority of us don't have any problems with them whatsoever. One of the principal criticisms levelled at them is that they are hard to work on, but actually fitting and replacing them is relatively simple. You just need the right tools, which is one of these, which is a bearing press, and then something to knock your old bottom bracket out with, one of these or one of these. To know whether or not you have a press fit bottom bracket, firstly ask yourself these questions. Is your bike newer than about 2010, and was it really expensive? Because if it was older than 2010, the chances are that it's highly unlikely you will have a press fit bottom bracket. And if it was an entry level or a mid-range bike, then it too is unlikely that you'll have a press fit. If, however, the answer to those questions was yes, and you still don't know whether you've got a press fit, you're going to have to take your cranks off. And then what you're looking for is for any form of indentations for a tool to actually bite into. So that very simply means that you will be able to thread or unthread your threaded bottom bracket. Whereas a press fit bottom bracket, as you can see, is completely smooth. Once you've established that you've got a press fit bottom bracket, you are then confronted with many different standards. But broadly speaking, there are really just two types of bottom bracket. Firstly, there are those that have a nylon or a metal cup with bearings already pressed inside, and the whole assembly is pushed inside your bottom bracket shell. And then you also have this type, which is very simply a cartridge bearing that's then pressed into cups that are already built into the frame. So that's like a BB30 style. When it comes to working on them, the difference between them is really only apparent when you are removing the bottom bracket in the first place, which we're going to do now. Let's start with the cup type first, so the BB86. As I said, you need to push the whole cup out. And to do that, you need a tool like this, which is a Park Tool BB90. And the way it works is that you push the tapered end through the bottom bracket, and then these sprung prongs at the end compress as you push it through the bearing, and then expand outwards just after you've got it through that initial bearing. And then you can tap the other end and the whole cup slides out. Now, it probably didn't escape your notice that actually it takes quite a bit of force to tap one of these cups out. And it's for that reason that these are not really designed to be reusable. So you fit it, and then when it's worn out, you tap it back out. It's not a job that you do regularly, pushing them in, taking them out. If your bike is in a work stand like this and you are hitting the bottom bracket out, do make sure that you brace the bike really firmly by the down tube there so that it's not just dangling from your seat post. With BB30, you need a tool like this, which is effectively a drift to tap your bearing out. So you thread it through your bottom bracket until it comes to rest behind the bearing on the opposite side of the bike. And then you square the whole tool up using that plastic guide, and then you can simply tap it out. Now, that guide is really important because if you don't have it, then you can effectively push your bearing out at an angle which can damage your frame and certainly your bearing. And so it's for this reason that although you could potentially try and bodge this whole procedure using a punch and a hammer, it is really, really risky because, as I say, you can damage your frame, which you don't want to do. Okay, so it's reassembly time. The first step is to set up our bearing press. To do that, we need to select the right adapters. And so the right adapter is effectively the one that has the same diameter as your crank axle and then the same external diameter as your bottom bracket shell. So in this case, it's a Shimano crank, which is 24mm, and it is a 44mm bottom bracket shell. Okay, you'll see that it fits in there very snugly, as if it's meant to. Then we thread one side onto our bearing press. Then we need to thread that through our frame before threading the other side onto your bearing press and then cinching it all together with the lock ring. Like that. Simple, right? The press itself works in a really straightforward way. You simply turn that lever there and you'll see that it's pushing the cups together. Now, the reason you use a bearing press is that the adapters hold everything straight, as does the fact that you're pushing both cups in at the same time. Again, the fact that it's going in straight is of extreme importance. One final question that needs answering before we do press our bottom bracket back in is to whether or not you put grease on the cups. General rule of thumb is if you are using a metal frame, then you want to put grease or a locking compound on the cups, and that prevents it creaking. And that includes, in fact, an aluminium sleeve inside a carbon frame. However, if you are pushing them into a carbon frame, then the general consensus is that you push them in dry, because a grease can potentially soften the inside of the carbon, which is not what you want. So in this instance, we're going carbon on carbon, so we're going in dry. With BB30, however, always grease up the bearings. Done. Again, just like with removal, you could potentially try and bodge this procedure, either with a homemade press and some blocks of wood as drifts, or indeed, dare I say it, a hammer and a block of wood. But the fact is, you are in all likelihood talking about a really expensive frame here, and such a poor cost-cutting exercise simply it doesn't add up when you weigh it against how much it would cost to either repair or even replace your frame. And that is what we're talking about here. If it goes wrong, it really could be quite bad news. So this is one of those workshop jobs where you need to invest in the right tool, but you only invest in it once, and then you can do the procedure as much as you want for free. Well, hopefully, despite that last severe word of warning, I haven't actually put you off doing this procedure. It is reasonably straightforward as long as you have the right tools. Now, make sure you subscribe to GCN. If you do like doing workshop jobs yourself, we have a Maintenance Monday video for you every single week. Now, if you need a bit more information about bottom bracket standards, and who doesn't, we have a video on that exact subject. So hopefully it will explain it for you. You can get to it just down there. Or to actually do a more rudimentary job, but one that is essential for this procedure, taking your cranks off, click just down there for a step-by-step guide.